Welcome to Journey to Novelist. This channel is devoted to new writers and those writers new to pursuing the goal of becoming a published author. This video is part of a series of videos where we are letting some software battle it out to see who's better, and we have so far done 2 of the 6 matchups we have planned. We let Dabble go against Motif and Campfire go against Reedsy Studio. The info link in the upper right corner should take you to those videos if you are interested in watching them. If you're wondering why I decided to do these battles, well, I just recently did my update for 2025 to find all of these software that had to do with writing novels. And there were like 30 titles. Quite a few of them were programs you downloaded and installed on your computer, but a lot of them were online software. That is, you work through a browser and your files are stored in the cloud on a server hosted by the application. So we are going to be looking at some of those softwares, and most particularly those that provide a writing environment where you can go in and write your novel, and they provide tools to help you manage that writing and to brainstorm and keep track of everything that goes on when you're writing a novel. So what I did was I found all the software that were online apps and met that criteria, and I decided to randomize it using a randomizing wheel to get my matchups, so that the matchups in this series are completely random. The 2 for matchup number 3 are First Draft Pro and AutoCrit. Both of these programs have completely free versions that you can use. First Draft Pro's free version does limit you to 1 project and 50,000 words. You can get to them at these addresses: First Draft Pro at firstdraftpro.com and AutoCrit at autocrit.com if you want to check the programs out. As far as their paid tiers, First Draft Pro has their starter for free, then their basic plan for $9 a month, and then their premium plan for $18 a month or $180 a year. AutoCrit has their free forever plan, which is free, and then their pro tier, which is $30 a month or $15 a month if you go with the annual subscription, which I believe that also works out to $180 a year. So either one of these programs for their premium is going to be the same price. So let's go ahead and look at how we're actually doing these battles. And what I did was I came up with a list of tasks that I wanted these softwares to actually help us with. And I use the same task for all 6 of these videos. The first set of tasks has to do with project setup. Now, I want to say that for all of these programs, we are looking for them to be able to complete these tasks in an intuitive manner. So the project setup involves creating a novel project and possibly putting that as part of a series of books. Then we want to keep track of things like the pen name, the genre, the date, the title, and the subtitle. And then we want to hopefully choose some sort of a structure template to help us with our writing and making sure we hit all the major beats. So that's what we're trying to do. Now, I've also assigned a number of points that these softwares can earn if they complete all the tasks that we have. And then they can get bonus points if they do particularly well. So I've loaded both of the softwares up into my browser. First Draft Pro on one tab, and then over on the other tab, I have AutoCrit. So they're both loaded, and I'm currently using the Opera browser in case you're wondering what browser this is. So that's what we're going to be doing, is coming in and out of this software and then looking at our list. So project setup, that's what we're going to do first, and we're going to go in and try to set up our novel project, put it in a series, and then put the rest of the information for our task 2, and also try to find the structure template, which I put in the project setup because a lot of programs require you to do that before you get into the writing. Let's go ahead and jump back into the browser in First Draft Pro to set up our project. This is their dashboard, and on here we have our button where we're going to use to actually start our project here with this Start from Scratch. It is also listed under this Add Project button. You'll see Start from Scratch here, as well as this option to quickly upload, which is also on the main dashboard screen. And this is used for uploading an existing project into First Draft Pro. So if you already have a story started in like a Word document or something, you can upload it. Now, I'm just noting this here, but a point will be awarded later for uploading, and that's the feature that handles that. Now you'll see under this drop down we also have some templates listed. but they are locked because they are part of the paid feature, and we're only awarding points for the free features, so we're not going to be giving any points for these. But this is where you would have found story structure templates if they had them, I think. And the ones they do have are not quite what we're looking for. Like the NaNoWriMo template gives you what you should write each of the 30 days of November if you had participated in NaNoWriMo, which was National Novel Writing Month, and that doesn't really exist anymore. They also had another one for romantasy, and then a short story one. But this isn't quite what we were looking for to fulfill that structure template option here in our list. So we're just going to start our project by hitting this Start from Scratch button. And it brings up this card, and you can click on it and type your name here, but before you get it typed, it's going to pop up this other screen for actually entering the information. And this is where you can put in the actual project name. Now, this was randomly selected, but our project name for this is Deadpan Promotion. That was a randomly chosen name. I use like a word generator. I'm going to set our project word count to 50,000, which is the maximum allowed for First Draft Pro. Then I'll hit continue, and right here I can actually put in the genre. So I'm going to pick fantasy and action adventure and hit continue. Now there's a place here for the project description, and this is actually meant to be kind of like the one sentence summary of your story, or maybe a brief description of what happens in your story. But we're going to use it for putting the rest of that information listed in task 2 of the setup. So I'm going to go ahead and put the subtitle name, which is a Lost in Between novel. And I am also going to be adding in the date I started working on this project. And then I'm going to put in the pen name that I associate with all the tests I do here on the site, JT Noveler. So there we go, and I'm going to continue, and this is the last of our settings. We're going to have chapter numbering turned on and no prologue, and that's just the defaults. And there, the project is basically set up. We're now in our writing environment and ready to start going. Now, First Draft Pro is getting 2 points for this because they did do some things, and they did make it really easy to set up the project, and we were actually able to put in the actual genre, although there's no points for the rest of the information, and there's no points for series or for the structure template. So 2 points for this first project setup for First Draft Pro. Now let's go ahead and go into AutoCrit and see what they do. And this is their dashboard, but we're going to go right on over to this writer's desk because that's where you actually write. And you'll see that they have something very similar to First Draft Pro. They have a blank document and an upload file. And the blank document is what we'll press when we actually start our project. The upload file is just like in First Draft Pro. It lets you take an existing document and upload it into the writer's desk and continue working on it here in AutoCrit. But before I start a project using this blank document, I'm going to scroll down to projects and hit this plus, and that's going to allow me to create a folder in this section here for our series of books. So I'm going to hit this, and I'm going to give the series name, and this is the Lost in Between series. And now if I look down, here is the Lost in Between series listed. So with that set, I'm going to go back up and hit the blank document and actually start the project. So it goes right into the writing environment in a blank document, and up here I can actually hit where it says untitled file and go ahead and put our file name right here, Deadpan Promotion. And now I actually have a title on my document, which is also the name of the document, and my project is basically set up. There's just one more thing I need to do when I come back out to the main screen, and that is I need to go down past, not this place where it shows it as a recent file, but down here into uncategorized, and I need to hit these 3 dots, and I can move my file into my folder for my series. And now everything's set and I'm ready to go. It's part of the Lost in Between series. And that is how you set up a project in AutoCrit. So they're getting a point for being able to set up a novel and a point for being able to set up a series folder. They're getting nothing for the name, genre, title, or subtitle part of it. because there was no actual place for any of this on the second line. The only thing we haven't looked at yet is this choose a structure template. And I did actually have to do a quick search, but it was just one single query to find where it was. And what you can do is you can come under notes here and you can add a note board with this little link right here. And if you say timeline, you will see that there is a template, the AutoCrit template for the 3-act structure, and if you hit that, you can actually create a board that has the complete 3-act structure laid out for you, so you have all the beats of that you can use as a guideline when you're writing. Let's go ahead and go back and take a final look at our project setup, and this choose structure template. We are going to give AutoCrit a point for this because they did have the 3-act structure and it is useful. So for this project setup, First Draft Pro is going to end up with 2 points and AutoCrit with 3. So on to the plotting and planning, and this is where we want to do all of our brainstorming for the major plot points and our story arc, and maybe the through thread for an entire series or a series of novels. And we want to look and see what kind of tools these two programs have for doing this plotting and planning. A really good program should have no trouble getting 4 points for having a bunch of tools. So let's look and see what these have. For AutoCrit, when we look here, they basically just have their note system. Now we do have the 3-act structure, so that's very handy, and it gives you a way to do all of your major beats. And then we can add additional boards for other things that we need to track, such as maybe a romance arc, and we're going to do a board for that. And I'm just going to make it a normal board, even though I could pick one of these templates. I'm just going to use a no template. And then I can start adding the beats that the romance arc needs to hit, such as the meet cute that's part of the romance. And I could add a board for other plots as well. Maybe the entire series plot, maybe world events, and I can use either their timeline version or their standard corkboard. So this is what AutoCrit basically has for doing their plotting and planning. So they do have something, and I'm going to give them a point for having a plotting and planning kind of method, but only the 1 point because they don't have like multiple ways to do it. It's really just the note cards in different formats. Now for their paid tier, they do have this planning tab. You'll see it's locked, but they do have tools in there if you're paying for that. There are a lot of tools there that help you generate story ideas. So for First Draft Pro and what they basically have their outline. And in their outlining system here, you'll see you can add scenes and chapters really easily. So you could use these scenes to put the major plot points and lay them out for your story. They didn't have a template, so you're going to be building this on your own, or maybe using a reference somewhere, and you can just add a scene, and we'll just put something in here like intro the hero, and here we'll put in the ordinary world, and we could add additional chapters as we needed to. They also have this note board, and you would think this would be useful like the one in AutoCrit, but in this case, for the free version, they only give you 10 notes. So it's like having 10 pieces of paper to write things down on. So I'm not really going to give them any plotting and planning or brainstorming points for their note section. But their outlining section is very useful, and you can do a lot with it as far as your planning. So they will get the plotting and planning point for that outlining system, and AutoCrit will get it for their note card system, but they each only get the 1 point because they're both kind of one-trick ponies when it comes to the plotting and planning tools. Let's move on to the character and setting creation task, and that is you're going to want to be able to develop your characters and also develop your settings. Maybe have some questionnaires or templates to fill out when you're doing that, so you can make sure you're kind of consistent in what information you're putting in, and to help kind of spark your imagination and give you some ideas of what kind of information to come up with for those types of things. So we're looking for places to put your characters and your settings, places that you might have questionnaires or templates to help you out. Maybe a place to put images, notes, maps, things that are more visual, maybe like the office layout, and also objects, which could be important. So in First Draft Pro, we're looking for those kind of tools, and they really don't have anything in the free version. All you have is the notes. Basically, what you could do is use a note for each type of those things. So you could create a note file and call it your character board or your character note sheet, and then you could type in your hero and maybe your romance character and then maybe your mentor, and put that in there, and then just put some information in there, just like you were doing a one-page document in Word or something and listing some information. Although I have to say that moving around in their notes is not as easy as moving around in a Word document. It's kind of hard to use, but you could do it. And you could also do a note for each type of things. A note that has your characters, a note that has your settings, a note that has your objects. And like I said, you only have 10 of them, so you're not going to be able to do a whole bunch. Now, as far as the images, you can like highlight some text and this little bar comes up, and you'll see on this bar there is a place for images. But if you click on that, it tells you right there that it is part of the paid version. So if you were doing the paid version, you could put images on your notes. You would also have more notes, but we're not looking at the paid version. So First Draft Pro is not doing well in their points right here. I'm going to go ahead and give them a point for having some place you can put the information, but they're only getting 1 point. Now for AutoCrit. Here in AutoCrit, again, you're going to be using the note system for doing your characters and your settings and your objects and all those things. So we're going to go ahead and create a board for our characters. So we just come up here and we type in some characters. And I'm just going to come down here where it says template, and you'll see there is a character creator template for a board here. So we're going to use that. And here we have a board for our characters, and they have a template here, and then they have a little information note that if we expand this, you'll see it explains some generalizations on types of characters that a story could have. So that could be helpful. But if we look at this template, we're going to expand that. You see it gives you a list of some of the type of information you could fill out when you're developing a character. So this is a character template. And what we can do is we can actually turn this into a template that we don't mess with, and then we can copy it for our different characters. So let's go ahead and do that. Close that, and I can come over here and hit this little 3 buttons here and hit copy, and that makes a copy of the note card. So now I have 2 note cards. I'm going to turn one of them into one that I'm going to call a template so I know not to mess with it. That way I will always have a blank one to start from. And then over here I'm going to go ahead and call this hero. And then I can start putting information about my hero, such as the character name, which is Devin. And I could change the colors, or I could make another copy for yet another character. So I'm going to take this one, and I'm going to make this the mentor character. There now I have 2 characters, and then I still have my original one that I haven't touched. And I can go in there and start making edits and filling out the different things. So they have characters, and we can do the same kind of thing for settings. We could make our own note card with information and build our own template for settings if we wanted to. So they can get a point for both characters and settings because the note card system can handle that. They automatically already have a questionnaire or template, so they get a point for that. And we can use the note cards again for objects as well. So I will give them a point because you can do that. There's no limitations on using those notes. So what I'm concerned about now is, can we do images in AutoCrit? So let's go ahead and go back into AutoCrit again and look and see if we can put images for like maps or the character's picture. So let's go ahead and go into maybe our hero character. We want to go into that. So we'll expand it for our hero character. And here under physical description, I want to go ahead and put an image of my character if I can. So I can click down here, and up here there is an insert image. So I can drag and drop a file in here that is an image. And let me go ahead and find one and drag it in. And here is an image of my character. Now I can resize it, but the thing I can't do is apparently there's no alignment feature here, which would be handy. It would be nice if I could put it over to left justify, but I guess just being able to have it is good enough for now. And I am going to give them the point for being able to put images in. And as you see, I also changed the mentor card to be a different color so I could color code my types of characters. Those are things you can do in AutoCrit. So AutoCrit's going to go ahead and get 4 points for the character setting and creation because they cover all the bases. So they're going to get 4, and First Draft Pro gets 1 for this character and setting creation. So let's move on to looking at the writing environment itself and see what they have to offer in their writing environments. We're wanting to be able to quickly create chapters and maybe even scenes and parts, and then be able to arrange those different pieces, those chunks of text, rearrange the chapters, rearrange the scenes within the chapters. And then we want to see if we have any control over fonts or backgrounds or margins, and we want to kind of see if the program lags any. So we're going to take a look at that. So let's start with First Draft Pro for this. And this is the writing environment here under Manuscript. You'll see here it lists our chapter and it says add chapter title. So we could go ahead and type the chapter title right here if we wanted to. Let's go ahead and do that. And that is our first chapter. And you'll see here that our scenes that we added in our outline are listed here. So we can quickly go to those and start writing if we wanted to. You'll see when I click in there, it changes the highlight of where I'm at. And here I'm going to go ahead and type out a little bit of text just so we can identify that particular scene when we're moving things around. And you'll see it does have spell check. It did notice that the name was not a word. There was no lag. It moved really easily. It was easy to type in. And it's a nice clean interface for First Draft Pro. We're going to go ahead and add a little bit to our other scene here, because I want to just have some text down here so we can kind of notice whenever we move chapters around. And again, you can notice that spell check is definitely enabled. It catches all my typos as I'm writing. And then I can just go back to these where they're highlighted and choose the correct word out of the list. Clicking on the word and choosing it, just like in most word processors these days. Now, if I wanted to add additional chapters or scenes, it's easiest to do that over in the outline section. So we'll go over to outline, and we're going to go ahead and add another chapter just by clicking here, and I could go ahead and name the chapter, and we're going to add another chapter and maybe call this climax, and another one for the ending. And there we have 4 chapters laid out, and we have different scenes for these chapters. And we're just going to give the scenes some quick labels. And this is just so we can see, as we're showing off that things can be moved around, what they look like. So back in the manuscript, you can now see all the chapters listed here, and you'll see the scenes we added in the right side. And they're also listed in the bar on the left side. So if we come back to the outline, you'll find that we can quickly move things around. Let's go ahead and move chapter 2 to before chapter 4, and the ending back to before the beginning, and then we'll take and move a scene for the intro hero into the ending, and then you see we can just drag things around however we need to. Now the order I'm putting them in actually makes no sense, but it is a good demonstration. We'll come back to our manuscript and you can look and you can see how it moved things around. Now, it automatically renumbered the number of the chapter to match the order it's in, but the name of the chapter will help tell you which one you're actually working in. So keep that in mind, that it does like renumber the chapter numbers just by dragging and dropping. So that was really easy to do in First Draft Pro, and they get a lot of credit for that being so quick to do. I'm going to actually give them 2 points for the chapter and scene creation, so 1 point for each of those, and I'm going to give them a quick point for being able to rearrange both of those, so 2 points there, and then some more points for just having that spelling available for us. Now, as far as the font's background margins and speeds of movement, the speed was really nice in First Draft Pro. As far as the font, there doesn't really seem to be any way to do that. They do also have some other tools here for like a focus mode. This is the typewriter mode. And with the typewriter mode, it will keep you in the middle of your document. So your cursor is never like at the end of your screen. It'll keep you centered. So let's go ahead and start typing in typewriter mode, and you see the text just keeps scrolling up as I'm typing here. Now if I turn typewriter mode off and I go in and I start typing, you'll see it doesn't scroll up until I reach the end of the screen and it has to move up. So that's the difference in the 2 modes, and that's really nice to have whenever you're typing. So I'm giving them a point for having those 2 things, the focus mode and having that typewriter mode. Let's take another quick look at our list. And First Draft Pro does really well with the chapter and scenes, although they don't seem to have any way to break it into parts. And you can rearrange your chapters and scenes really easy, but again, there's no parts. But what about editing text? We've already seen that I could type in there and they had the focus mode, but I also want to kind of look at putting text in there, importing text into your chapters. If you've maybe written in a Scratch document somewhere and you want to move that text in. For First Draft Pro, we're going to have to stick to cutting and pasting. So let's go ahead and jump back into First Draft Pro. And here in First Draft Pro, you'll see there is this little bar and there's places to do images, but not a lot of features are in that particular bar. So we're going to want to look and see if there's a way to import text. And like I said, you're going to be limited to doing cutting and pasting here. So let me go find a file where I have some text and we will import that in with the cut paste method. So here is a document where I have some text, and I'm going to assume that I want to put some of this text into my chapter. So I could just highlight it and do a copy here, and then move over here, go to the scene I want to put it in, and just hit paste, and there is the text pasted in. So let's move on to AutoCrit and see how their writing environment works. So here we have their blank document where we can start doing our writing, and when we want to enter in our chapters, what we need to do is just come up here to this place where it says chapters and hit the little plus button, and we can go ahead and add our chapters. We'll add one called The Beginning, and there is a chapter for that. So let's go ahead and add a couple more chapters, and we will go ahead and add one more for the ending. And there we have multiple chapters, and I could just come in here and between these 2 headings go ahead and add some text. I'm just going to paste in the stuff I previously had to the clipboard that I put in the First Draft Pro. So there is the same option of cutting and pasting text into your chapter. Now if I want to rearrange the chapters, I can do that as well. In this drop down, I can just drag and drop the various chapters into a different order, and you can see that they are moving in our document, and there I kind of put them back in place. So that's how you can drag and drop chapters around in AutoCrit. Now you don't have any control over scenes. It doesn't have anything to break the story up into scenes, and you can't drag and drop scenes. So you do have the chapter, so that they'll get a point for that, and you can rearrange the chapters, so you get a point for that. And then there's the cut paste, so that's good. Now, with the fonts, backgrounds, margins, and the whole speed of movement, you do have a little bit of control. We do have a spell check here, so there, that word was misspelled, and I easily fixed it. And you'll see right here we have other spelling tools. I could actually use the add-on within the Chrome browser and use Grammarly if I wanted to install that. So I could have some grammar checking, but it does have spell checking in there. There are some other tools such as a thesaurus here if you are in the paid version, but that thesaurus is not in the free version. I can also import text from a file with an upload here, and I can just go over and find my file and then go ahead and drag and drop that into this little window and hit import, and it will import the text into the document. So there we have a couple of other sections from that same file I used previously right into the chapter that I'm looking at. So there are two ways to import text in the AutoCrit environment, not just the cut paste. And then you have the options for changing your font and the points and some heading styles and some things like that up here in this toolbar. And then some alignment and indent are pretty easy to do in this environment. Now this is First Draft Pro, and you see they also had the ability to handle some of the alignment and indents. And like I said, you can change this to italicized or code block in First Draft Pro. So those are things that are pretty similar in the two different softwares. And you do have a focus mode where you can go full screen here and kind of close out all the other windows. That's similar to the focus mode in First Draft Pro. I don't actually see a typewriter mode though in AutoCrit. So for the writing environment options, both programs did pretty well. First Draft Pro is getting 7 points for the writing environment, and AutoCrit is going to get 5 points for the writing environment because they're lacking the ability to change and relocate scenes, and they actually don't have that typewriter mode, so they lost a little bit there. That gives us one more thing to look at in these two softwares, and that is the file and project management system and what they can do. Now we've already looked a little bit with the importing of text, so they both get points for being able to import text. They have the cut paste method. AutoCrit also can import files into chapters, and they both have that upload at the very beginning to upload an existing projects in. So next thing is the export of text, backups, and versioning and archiving tools. And that's what we want to look at. So let's go back into our browser windows and take a look at what we have here in AutoCrit for those. Now, we do have an export right here, and it gives you quite a few options as to how you export. You can go to a docx file, an RTF file, or several others. Okay, so I went ahead and exported this document out to a DOC file, and I've opened it here in LibreOffice. You can see that it did export the text out. Now I'm going to go ahead and do one more export just for a sample. And what I'm going to do is send out this PDF file and give it a second, and there we have where it downloaded. Let's go ahead and take a look at that PDF file. I have it open here, and you'll see that it includes the table of contents, and you'll see that it is formatted for these particular pages, and there are settings in AutoCrit that handle that. So let's do one more type of save, and that is where I'm going to click this and hit Save As, And I'm going to go ahead and choose my project that this is in. And I'm going to give the file a name. I'm going to call this backup because maybe I'm getting ready to make a bunch of edits or move some chapters around, and I want to make sure that I have a backup in case something goes wrong. So there we go. We can go back to the dashboard again. And if I look under my Lost in Between folder, you'll now see that backup version exists here. Now the final thing I want to do with this is go ahead and delete this backup because I don't actually need it. With just a button press and then a confirmation there, and that file is deleted. Now for versioning, under here you will see a place for versions, and your versions will be listed. I'm not sure about all the functionality of the versions, but we're just noting that they do have something. So we've covered all 4 of these items for AutoCrit. So now we're going to want to look at them in First Draft Pro. So let's go back to the browser and back into First Draft Pro. And the only thing I found for getting information back out of First Draft Pro is this button here, which is Export to Google Drive. So to use this, you of course would have to have a Google account and Google Drive set up so you could export to that. Once it's there, you can do pretty much anything you can do with it on Google Drive. So if you know those features, then you'll know what you can do. But there doesn't seem to be any way to do versioning or backups. Basically, you would just be sending it to Google Drive any time you want to make another version or a backup of your file. And that's all First Draft Pro seems to have, at least in the free version. So in this matchup, AutoCrit seems to come out ahead with 18 points. They get 5 points for this section because they did have both import and export with the 2 methods for export. And then they did have some way to do backup copies and versioning. First Draft Pro had import and they did have export, so they get a point for each of those items. The total comes to AutoCrit with 18 points and First Draft Pro with 13. Not to say that AutoCrit is the perfect program. First Draft Pro definitely comes out ahead in the chapter creation and handling the actual text, but AutoCrit comes out ahead in many of the other things, such as all the notes and functionalities there, and some of the import and export of text. If this video is something that you enjoyed and you're getting some use out of it, please consider liking and subscribing to this channel. Here are some other videos that you might find useful, including the link to the one where I give you all 30 of the softwares I found this year in 2025. Thank you for watching.